Hi, everyone. I'm Anne-Marie Green. Thanks for joining us. President Obama is making a rare visit to the Pentagon later this afternoon to meet with his national security team about efforts to fight ISIS. The president's meetings follow a wave of airstrikes over the weekend by the U.S.-led coalition in eastern Syria. It is being called one of the most sustained aerial operations carried out in Syria to date. The Pentagon says the strikes targeted bridges and transit routes in the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa. The president has insisted that he will not put combat boots on the ground in Syria, but he has admitted the U.S. lacks a complete strategy to fight ISIS. Major Garrett joins us now from the White House with more on what the president is expected to say today. Major, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you. Last time the president traveled across the river, the Potomac River, to the Pentagon was October of last year, also on this subject, to sit down face to face with his top military commanders about the ever-evolving crisis to first degrade, then destroy. That's the administration's terminology. The ISIS fighters in both Iraq and Syria. And White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest told us today that this is not a meeting to evaluate new elements of the president's strategy or come up with any new dimensions to that strategy, but just to see how the one that the president has already authorized is progressing. And on the terminology of airstrikes, the White House said over the weekend the intensification around Raqqa indicates two things. One, that the United States and its coalition partners are identifying more targets and are trying to keep the ISIS leadership under a sense of vulnerability, and also cut off shipment routes to move either troops or material from Syria, the unofficial capital of the caliphate that the ISIS state says it has, in Raqqa, into Iraq. To the degree that that's possible, the administration believes these airstrikes were successful, but nowhere near enough to begin the process of degrading ISIS in Syria, which has been a much tougher effort than the one ongoing in Iraq.
Now, the president was certainly criticized when he said that they didn't have a complete strategy when it came to getting control of ISIS. But this has got to be a delicate dance. You want to reveal information because the people want to know, lawmakers want to know what's going on, but at the same time, you don't want to reveal so much that the enemy knows what you're doing as well. I mean, how do you balance that?
Well, you balance it, or the president will attempt to balance it, by saying one thing that has been constant: no U.S. ground troops in there in an ongoing offensive capacity. Now, remember, in Iraq, there are more than 3,300 U.S. military personnel acting as trainers and advisors. They are, in a literal sense, boots on the ground, but they're not combat forces. U.S. has no combat presence at all, or training or personnel presence inside Syria, although it is training what it hopes to be successful moderate opposition rebels in countries around Syria, namely Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. What the administration wants to do is use this ongoing air campaign to make it difficult for ISIS to operate, while in Iraq, Iraqi forces build up their strength, build up their capabilities, and eventually try to take back two very important cities: Mosul in the north and Fallujah, Ramadi, actually three cities, Fallujah and Ramadi on the western part in Anbar province. As far as Syria is concerned, it's a much longer term campaign. Airstrikes and a very, very slow process of training these so-called moderate rebel forces. There aren't even 100 of those in the field yet. That's going to be a much, much longer campaign. Syria has always been the much more difficult part of this process and will remain so for the foreseeable future.
This is similar to what Defense Secretary Ash Carter outlined the last time he spoke in front of an Armed Services Committee. It didn't go so well. They didn't think of it as a solid strategy, and he's due to speak again tomorrow, correct?
That's correct. And Ash Carter was at the Pentagon today talking with his French counterpart, the French defense minister, rather. And he said this weekend campaign did indicate something that he believes is strategically potentially important. That is to say, 16 targets hit around Raqqa, again, the unofficial capital of the caliphate created by the ISIS state fighters, indicates that there is slightly better intelligence on the ground, meaning that there are either rebel factions or those who have become sympathetic to the coalition identifying targets that can be hit in relatively short order. That's something that's been missing from the battle space in Syria for a good long time. It doesn't indicate a turning point. It doesn't indicate that this whole battle space in Syria is now wide open, and the United States and its coalition partners have precise targets it can hit all the time, but it does suggest there is some better targeting from the ground, and that also suggests better cooperation on the ground from whatever source, and the coalition tried to exploit that over the weekend.
Yeah, that certainly is something new. Major Garrett, thanks a lot. The president is expected to make remarks after his meeting with Pentagon officials, and we will bring that to you live.